Now, I want to know, a lot of people don't necessarily associate animation with cinematography in a way.
Right.
You kind of think of them as two separate entities. Talk to me about what a cinematographer's role is in an animation, like, Soul.
Yeah, so it is divided between myself and another artist on each film it is. And so I'm on the front end, which is basically, we call it in the studio, we call it layout, which is essentially the term or the name it's had since early days of Disney and, just 2D animation going way back. So we're basically the ones who are essentially the cinematographers or the camera people who translate the storyboards into the 3D environment, using kind of the principles of film language and just, everything that a live action film, cinematographer would consider. And so basically, we're kind of that initial stage because everything up until our department was, just 2D drawn storyboards in a story reel for years. Sometimes they're working on these things for years before it comes to us. And so we're really that first, time to figure out the timing of things, the camera movement, the kind of choreography, just what the characters, are actually doing in the scene, how they're blocked. So we're responsible for all of that, and then we're doing it in a rough form because we know it's going to be animated after us. But even though the lighting, DP who comes much later down the road, even though we're separated by months, really, that kind of time period has actually collapsed in the last few films. And it used to be, lighting wouldn't really start until much later on, after things were well into animation or later. And now we have each film is, really getting closer and closer, and we're really collaborating a lot more. So Ian and I worked closely on that.
So you're planning your shots as a director of photography, but you're not able to light. The lighting comes after. That's interesting to me because, directors of photography in, I guess, traditional film, lighting is it.
Yeah, it is. That said, though, we actually have a very rough lighting preview, and actually Ian, in the lighting DP on this film, was actually giving us kind of very temp lighting, as we were doing our shots. So we would kind of do these location scout shots basically in our software, which is called Presto, and then I would hand that to him, and he would basically then go in and he loved it because it was a very early preview for to get his head around what the lighting would be ultimately when it did come to his group. And so again we do have shadows now. But when I first got to Pixar, we didn't have any of that. Lighting was really much later, and we worked on WALL-E with Roger Deakins. He consulted on that film.
Oh, wow.
And that was the very first thing he said when he, got there is he was shocked that how divorced the two parts of the process were. And he just said, 50-60% of his job was lighting. And he just couldn't imagine not having that in there. And so, right around that film is when we first they started to really work on it. But it was very separate for a long time.
So what are you actually working with? So like you get on set, you're ready to do your work for the day.
Yeah.
Are you using virtual cameras? How are you conducting the filmmaking?
Yeah, again, it's all taking place within our software, which is Presto, and it's for people who aren't that familiar with. There's third-party programs out there like Maya and 3D Studio Max, and a lot of different other packages that studios use. Presto is essentially kind of, just our own in-house version of that. But yes, you do have a camera in there, and we have a lens package in there, and then, depth of field preview, and you can, put your camera on a dolly track and on a crane rig, all within this 3D environment. That said, we do have another process which we use as well, which is we can actually go into a 3D capture volume. And we have a few of them at the studio, and you can actually sit there with an iPad and actually move around in the space, and you have screens around you kind of showing you, what you're actually seeing. And some directors really like that approach. We also use that particular approach for later on when we're doing camera polish to mimic better the feel of and movements of a live action camera.